sense? So first off, let's look at blood pressure. Because this is something that most everybody, if you go into the standard care that we have today, they're going to check blood pressure. Does that make sense? Okay, so is blood pressure the same in America as it is in, say, Europe?
No.
No, it's radically different. Okay, did you know that?
No.
Did you know that blood pressure in this country you're considered to be 120 over 80? Well, actually not anymore, it's now 115 over 75. Okay, and is that resting? Is that all the time? Is that every body type? Is that everybody? No, it's illogical. In Europe, they don't even, if it's below 180, they consider it normal. They're not even going to use blood pressure as a gauge. And in India, if your blood pressure below 140, they think it's pathology. They think it's dangerous. So first off, this is a quote out of a medical textbook. The first principle of therapy of high blood pressure or hypertension is the knowledge of when to treat and when not to. Now, I read a lot. It's hard to find common sense in medical world, but that makes sense. So first off, I want to show you how blood pressure is taken, how stupid therapies are prescribed. So first off, when you're taking blood pressure, what you got to do, now this was developed in 1905, so it's about 100 years ago, that they take and they close off the blood vessels in your arm. Okay, so they actually stop the blood pressure. They shut off the blood vessels. And then they slowly release this pressure, and they're listening. And as soon as they start to hear a little bit of blood flow, they hear that, they mark that number down. Okay, now that's supposed to be the output of the heart. They're going to call it systolic. And then they keep listening to it as they slowly release the pressure. And then when they stop hearing that sound, then they write that number down too. Okay? Now this is considered the output of the heart and the resting blood pressure of the entire body. Now this is, we're still not sure what you're actually hearing. Some people say it's turbulence, some say it's just different sounds, we're not quite sure. And you can see, now she's standing up, he's sitting down. Did you know that when you're standing up, your heart has to work a little bit harder? When you're sitting down, it doesn't have to work as hard? Did you know that when you take blood pressure, you're supposed to be sitting down for 10 minutes? You're not supposed to be diagnosed with high blood pressure unless it's taken at 3 different times of the day at 3 different occasions over a 2-week span. Did you know that? No, that's the actual medical protocol. So the protocols that most people are diagnosed with high blood pressure are inaccurate. So what they came up with, and this is frustrating, this is out of the Journal of the American Medical Association, they say that if you have some type of damage to the heart or some type of damage to your pump, that if you have higher pressure, you have lower death rates. I'm sorry, higher pressure, lower death rates. So does that mean the entire paradigm of everybody having the exact same blood pressure is foolish? Yes or yes? And I'm going to give you the answers. I'm going to make it really, really easy. And this is frustrating because they say that if you've had damage to the heart and you have pressure over 161 systolic, that's the first number, that you had lower death rates. So think of this. You got damage to a pump. Now to keep that pump alive, to keep that heart alive, do you think the heart needs oxygen? Yes or yeah, that makes sense. It makes sense to me. So now if you got damage to this, do you think it maybe requires more oxygen than something that's functioning correctly? Oh my gosh, does that make sense that maybe if you have damage to the artery or damage to the heart, that pressure may keep it alive longer? Yeah, so what we got to do, and then these are some of the drugs that they use, beta blockers, ACE inhibitors, you know, drugs, because again, in America, we're just looking at everybody being the exact same. So if your blood pressure is a little bit higher, you're given a beta blocker, ACE inhibitor, diuretic, some kind of chemical to slow the heart down. Now, if you're slowing the pump down, does that help oxygen of the body or slow it down? It slows it down. It slows it down. Now, that's interesting because when you look at it, you're seeing metabolic processes. Okay. Anything you do, any medication slows or stops a metabolic process. So if you know that if you're going to slow this or chemically tax the heart with a blood pressure drug, these medical journals, the Journal of the American Medical Association, the CDC, the World Health Organization, all of these different articles say you will have lower blood pressure, but you'll die an early death of heart disease, cancer, or diabetes. Okay, now when we talk about blood pressure, and we talk an entire hour on it, we understand how it's a foolish approach to chemically lower your blood pressure, but just know that the current state of health of our population is everybody has the same number, everybody gets this type of drug, everybody is going to get that chemical lowering, and what's the state of our health in America? Is heart disease, cancer, and diabetes rampant. 50% of our population has cancer. Has that ever happened before? No. 50% of our population has diabetes. Okay? Heart disease. Between heart disease and cancer, 5 out of 6 Americans are going to die. And none of those are genetic. Okay? You got to understand. When you talk about genetic diseases, cancer, heart disease, and diabetes are not genetic. So now we have a new method, and this is what all the healthcare professionals are moving to. We found a better way to diagnose it. So it's not blood pressure the same number for everybody. That's foolish, that's ignorant. If you got a doctor that's checking it and actually thinks that accurate, fire him. Tell him to go back to school and learn pulse pressure. No, seriously, if he's not doing his job, you got to figure, in the old days, you would pay your doctor when you felt good. You'd stop paying him when you felt bad. So if your health isn't optimal, stop paying him, fire the guy. What they came up with now is a pulse pressure. What this is the difference between the high number and the low number. And so this makes sense. It makes sense to me. So if I'm speaking before a group, my pressure right now is probably about 140, 150, the first number. My second number is probably, I don't know, about 100, maybe 110. And that's normal under physical activity. Me and my son, we were working out at the gym, and I'm straining, my head's turning red, I'm lifting as much as I possibly can. My blood pressure's around 350. Okay, over about 250, and that's normal. When you're weightlifting and you're straining, normal blood pressure would be 400 over 200. That's normal. Okay, so blood pressure changes. It's activity dependent. What the pulse pressure is it measures the difference. So now the difference is consistent with everyone. So if you have closed arteries, you're going to require, if you need to get the same oxygen through a smaller tube, you need higher pressure. So that means you're going to have higher pressure on the output and higher pressure on the resting because you have a smaller surface area to get the same oxygen through. Does that make sense? So now it's pulse pressure. But what this does, it clues you into more, not just you have high blood pressure, need a drug. It's if it's greater than 40 difference. So like if you have 120 over 80, that's in the ballpark, that's normal. If you have 130 over 90, that's in the ballpark, that's normal. If you have 150 over 110, that's 40, that's normal, depending on your activity. If you have heart disease, 160 over 120, again, that would be normal, okay, because see, the difference is always 40. If it's greater, it means the arteries are too hard. Okay, atherosclerosis. Now, anything that hardens the arteries, this means there's toxicity or deficiency. It means that you've had poisonous food, or the arteries aren't getting the appropriate nutrients, okay, and they're starting to get harder, or age. See, one of the things with arteries, they're unique, that they're like, have you ever heard of plaquing in the artery? Okay, have you ever heard of cholesterol deposits in the artery? Okay, well, have you ever heard of cholesterol deposits in the veins? No, it doesn't happen. So the artery is a totally different structure. In fact, the artery actually has springs in it. And the arteries close to increase the pressure and vasodilate or open up to decrease the pressure. So the arteries are actually a living pressure regulating structure. So now if the arteries get harder because they're not getting appropriate enzymes or appropriate soluble fibers, they don't have that spring ability, so the body has to adapt to increase the pressure. Okay, so what we're doing is now the real good docs, they're measuring pulse pressure. So if the pulse pressure is greater, it means there could be fatty deposits, hardening of the arteries, could be damage to the blood vessels, iron deficiency, hyperthyroidism. So it starts to give a clue to how the body's functioning. Okay, does that make more sense? And if it's less than that, it means the heart's not working correctly. It means there's poor heart function. So it's not one drug for everybody that's going to lead to early death, heart disease, or cancer. It's actually a clue to how the body's functioning. So we can change the diet, change the nutrition, change the physiology, and then we see the outcome in the change of the test. Does that make more sense? Okay, good. Because all of these, poor heart function, it comes from deficiency or toxicity. And so I want you to clue in, if you've been diagnosed with high blood pressure, it means, or some other type of condition, it means that there's deficiency or toxicity. Now when we look at this also, blood viscosity, this is the other test. See, these tests, the pulse pressure and the blood viscosity, your doctor isn't doing right now. Why? Because he's ignorant. Okay, he really is. When you look at this, the thickness of the blood. Now let's say, how many people in here drink enough water? Okay. Both my kids raised their arm, and there's one other person. Okay, good. So 3 of us drink enough water. Okay, so now since water is the best blood thinner, what do you think that pump has to do in order to pump this thick blood through? What has to happen to pressure? There's a clue. It goes up, yes! Okay, good. See, I'm really helping you out. Okay, so when you look at this, now blood vessels only last 120 days. So now you got this big old huge red blood cell that carries oxygen. Totally cool cell. It's biconcave, and it's shaped this way so it holds a ton of oxygen. But it's got to be flexible. It's got to bend. It's got to turn. It's got to go through capillaries in order to give up its oxygen. So if the blood vessels are old, okay, they don't have that flexibility. You can't get the same oxygen. Have you ever heard of what are they? It's the deadliest drug in America. It's really popular. The Tylenol. Yeah. Have you ever heard of that? Okay. Well, Tylenol, along with other drugs called non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, they inhibit prostaglandin production. Now, the tough part with this, I know it's going to sound really stupid to you, but it takes those beautiful blood cells and glues them together. So now if you're trying to get oxygen to the capillaries or like to the lungs to transfer oxygen or to the capillaries to keep tissue alive, and you get these blood vessels clumped together, do you think they can hold more oxygen or less? Less. Way less. It's ridiculously stupid. What ignorant person would prescribe this stuff? Okay, it's going to destroy your joints. You won't be able to build cartilage. Your blood vessels are going to clump together, but you might have temporary pain relief. Here, try this. Oh, no, you're not going to take it? Okay, good. What's the deadliest drug in America? Heroin, cocaine, or Tylenol? Tylenol, yeah, it's like crazy. But what that does, it thickens and damages blood vessels, thickens the blood vessel wall. Now, blood vessels only last 120 days. You've got an organ back here on the left-hand side called the spleen. How many people love your spleen? Do you know what the spleen does, though? Oh, this is a trip. Okay, when you know anatomy and physiology, and I taught it for 8 years, the spleen, it's about the size of your fist. It checks every red blood cell every 20 minutes. And it checks it for size and viability. Any red blood cell it doesn't like, it passes over to the liver, and the liver takes it and breaks down those blood cells, the protein constituents, turns it into bile so you can digest fats. And fats help your immune system so nothing is wasted. Oh my